This is a CBC podcast.
Good morning. You're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1. Coming up on today's show, air quality warnings are in effect across the province as a result of wildfire smoke. We'll be hearing some of the best ways that you can breathe easy. And later, historic heat waves and massive wildfires, and it's only the beginning of July. So what does this mean for our environment? At 7:45, we'll be diving into the pyro CB clouds appearing in the sky because of the massive wildfires. That's coming up. First, though, let's check in with Bill Fee at our Daybreak News Desk.
Good morning, Matt. An outbreak at the Rotary Manor of COVID-19 in Dawson Creek has now ended, the last in a long-term care facility in BC. The care home saw 2 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in residents and 1 death as a result of the June outbreak. And the BC Wildfire Service wants to remind boaters to steer clear of firefighting aircraft working in the Caribou Regional District. There are currently a couple of wildfires of note burning near 100 Mile House.
Thanks very much. That's Bill Fee at our Daybreak News Desk. It's warming up slowly across the region right now. In Prince George, it's currently 11 degrees and sunny, 11 degrees in Quesnel. It's cloudy in Prince Rupert and 12 degrees in Sandspit. It is 15 and at the Massett Municipal Airport, mostly cloudy and 13 degrees. In the coastal inland, it is cloudy and 12 degrees in Bella Bella, mainly sunny and 11 degrees in Bella Coola. The Terrace Airport between Terrace and Kitimat, mainly sunny and 13 degrees. In Stewart, mostly cloudy and 13 degrees. In the Bulkley Valley, 13 degrees in Smithers and 7 degrees in Burns Lake. In Fort St. James, 14 degrees. In Mackenzie, it's 13 degrees. Up in the Peace, it's partly cloudy and 14 degrees in Fort St. John. In Dawson Creek, it is sunny and 10 degrees. In Chetwynd, cloudy and 15. In Fort Nelson, 15 degrees. In Dease Lake, cloudy and 11 degrees. Bill?
It'll be pretty much a hot and smoky day across much of our listening area. Smoky Skies Bulletin does remain in effect for Prince George and the central interior. Expect sunshine. Clouds later on today. Highs will get to about 31 degrees for the North Caribou and Quesnel. Also sunny, but smoky as well under that Smoky Skies advisory. Increasing clouds for the afternoon. Highs of around 32. In the Robson Valley, there's a chance of thunderstorms by this afternoon. Highs of 32 and an extreme UV index as well. Sun and cloud for the Lakes District and Smithers. Highs reaching 29 across the Peace and Fort Nelson. Sunny and highs to 34 with the humidex. There is a risk of late-day thunderstorms. BC Peace River south and north also under a heat warning today as well. Clouds for coastal inland sections. Highs getting up to about 25 degrees. As you get closer to the water, expect mainly cloudy conditions. A chance of showers today with highs getting to 15 degrees.
It's 6:13 and you're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1. I'm Matt Allen, and it's time now for a look at sports. Stephen Bull is here to give us the latest updates. Good morning.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm good. So it's official. There will be no spectators at the Tokyo Olympics after a state of emergency was declared. Though there may not be any fans, but the games are still going to go on, right?
Yeah, so as far as we're concerned here in Canada, watching on TV or on cbcsports.ca, wherever we're consuming it, it's all going ahead. It won't be any different other than the background will look different with all those empty seats. The IOC itself, in terms of their business impact, about 75% of their revenue is TV rights, but the local hosting organization, the Japanese, this is really bad for them. Hundreds of millions of dollars in ticket revenue will be lost. But what about the athletes? When you're performing, when you're on the field, do they hear the cheers and the boos and everything? Well, former Team Canada rugby player Jen Kish says that while the game is going on, they're just so dialed in at this level, it's just kind of white noise. But they will notice it after the games and after the events, and that's a bit of a shame.
What's sad about it is that, once you win or if you lose, that's when you're going to get the reaction from fans. And those are moments that you want to be able to share with fans. At the end of the day, there's still an Olympic medal on the line. Very few athletes in the world have those.
And it should be noted that the Paralympic Games might have spectators. That is because the state of emergency that has been declared because of surging COVID numbers, if it doesn't last that long, they might have fans because the Paralympics don't begin until August 24th and the Olympics wrap up August 8th. So we'll just have to wait and see for that one.
Yeah. Over now to tennis and Wimbledon, where later this morning, one of the biggest matches for a Canadian men's tennis player ever will be taking place. Our Canadian player will be taking on the world #1 ranked player in the world who has some high praise for him. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so Denis Shapovalov is about an hour or two away from his semifinal at Wimbledon. The only Milos Raonic made it to the finals at Wimbledon in 2016, and I'm trying to dance around how to politely say that no one's ever won. That's the best
Right,
they've done.
Yeah.
But those are the facts. If Denis Shapovalov beats Novak Djokovic today, he will have gotten as far as any single men's player has in a Grand Slam ever. Only one Canadian has ever won, that of course being Bianca Andreescu. Of course, I'm just talking singles here. There have been doubles titles. So a big match and against the world #1 and arguably the best tennis player ever, Novak Djokovic. But for what it's worth, Djokovic has taken notice of Shapovalov.
He's really feeling great. I mean, it's impressive the way he's been playing. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that that's going to be the biggest test I will have so far in the tournament. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a battle, and I need to be at my best.
High praise indeed. So they've got to wait for the other semifinal to wrap up. It's still very early. Marco Berrettini, who beat Felix Auger-Aliassime, has the lead in that one.
We're going to be paying attention to that. It's going to be a tough but a great match. Finally, in golf, it's only one round in, but a Canadian is holding the top spot at the U.S. Senior Open.
Yeah, Stephen Ames. He shot 5 under in the first round, so good enough to be tied for first. The U.S. Senior Open is one of the 5 major championships in senior golf. Ames became a dual citizen in 2003 when he married a Canadian. He was born in Trinidad and Tobago. He's had 4 PGA Tour wins before joining the Senior Tour, the biggest being the 2006 Players Championship. So, Stephen Ames, how do you continue to find success at these U.S. tournaments?
I don't know. Because I always thought that I had a better record at the British Open than I did at the US Open. And I looked back and I went, I actually played better at the US Open. And I prefer playing British Open, which is kind of interesting. I don't know what it is. Obviously, it's a test when we play a US Open. The USGA do set it up extremely tough for us, especially the younger guys. I have no interest in playing those again.
I love that answer. You're so good. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just crush it here. So we'll keep an eye on him. Hopefully he can keep it up. He's a great golfer.
All right. Well, thank you so much for those updates, Stephen. We'll be paying attention to those stories over the weekend.
Sounds good. Have a good weekend.
You too. That is Stephen Bull. At our CBC Sports Desk. It's 6:18 and you're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1. A new addictions treatment center will be built near Vanderhoof. The project is being led by Cariaso County Family Services and will go into a former resort on Tajik Lake. Initially, the project was rejected by the province because the resort is on agricultural reserve land, meaning it is set aside for farming purposes. But now, an exemption has been granted allowing the 60-bed treatment center to be built. Marilyn Jansen is Manager of Health and Wellness for Cariaso County Family Services. She told the CBC's Andrew Criada about her reaction to the news.
I did a happy dance when I found out it was going to happen. I was a bit tentative and hesitant and holding my breath. So I was super happy when the decision came.
So can you explain again, now that we know that it is going to happen, what is going to be built? What is the vision for this space going forward?
We are building a treatment center for First Nations people to access. It is a 4-week program that provides a multitude of different services, starting with culture and ceremony. So I think that what's unique about our program is that we start with culture and ceremony. We believe that culture is healing. So for us, this land was perfect. It's in a rural area, it's beside water, and these are all things that are important for ceremonies. There are not a lot of treatment beds in the north, and when you look at the current overdose crisis that is happening, we think that we'll be able to open up these beds and support people who might not necessarily have access to treatment.
That's Marilyn Jensen of Carissa County Family Services. The next step is securing more funding to allow the project to move forward. You can read more on our website, cbc.ca/BC.
Good morning, Margaret Gallagher here, host of Hot Air, and this week you are invited to a birthday party as we celebrate July-born musicians like Phoebe Snow, Bill Kuhn, and Dr. Lonnie Smith. You bring the ice cream cake, we'll bring the tunes. The festivities start Saturday right after the 5 p.m. news. Until then, here's a song from Nelson-born Juno Award-winning singer Sienna Dallin, whose birthday was this past Tuesday. This is Old Devil Moon.
I looked at you and suddenly something in your eyes I see soon begins bewitching me. It's that old devil moon that you stole from the sky. It's that old devil moon in your eyes. You and your glance make this romance too hard to handle. Stars in the night, blazing the light, can't hold a candle to your razzle-dazzle. You've got me flying high and wide on a magic carpet ride, full of butterflies inside. Wanna cry, wanna croon, wanna laugh like a loon. It's that old devil moon in your eyes. Just when you think I'm free as a dove, old devil moon deep in your eyes blinds me with love. And suddenly, something in your eyes I see soon begins bewitching me. It's that old devil moon that you stole from the sky. It's that old devil moon in your eyes. You and your glance make this romance too hard to handle. Stars in the night, blazing that light, can't hold a candle to your razzle-dazzle. You've got me flying high and wide on a magic carpet ride, full of butterflies inside. Wanna cry, wanna croon, wanna laugh like a loon. It's that old devil moon in your eyes. Just when you think I'm free as a dove, old devil moon deep in your eyes. Old devil moon deep in your eyes. Old devil moon deep in your eyes. Deep, 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 deep in your eyes. That old devil moon sitting little now, sitting little now. So da 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 da. Sitting little now.
Nelson-born singer Sienna Dallin and Old Devil Moon. Her birthday was on July 6th. You can celebrate more July jazz birthdays Saturday on Hot Air. BC's Jazz Show starts right after the 5 p.m. news, Saturday on CBC Radio 1.
Hi, my name is Jessica Friesen on behalf of Cops for Cancer. This year, the Tour de North is pedaling approximately 900 kilometers from Prince George to Prince Rupert to raise awareness and fundraise for pediatric cancer research and pediatric support. These funds go towards research development, treatment, and also sending kids battling cancer to Camp Good Times, where they can have a safe camp experience like any other kid. Now more than ever, these kids need our help. If this is something you wish to support, you can go to support.cancer.ca and click donate. There you will be able to look up me, Jessica Friesen, or any other of the 5 Rupert riders as a participant and donate directly to our pages. Again, that's Jessica Friesen, spelled Friesen. Thank you so much for your support.
Thanks for that. And a quick reminder, if you have a community service announcement that you'd like us to play on the air, dial 1-866-340-1932 and leave us a message. It's 6:27. You're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1. Time now for a look at business. Phil Dumont has today's top stories from the CBC Business Desk.
Good morning. This week, markets started dropping as concern has begun to creep in about North America's economic recovery. It's all about falling bond yields. In this case, think of a bond yield as a proxy for economic growth. All of a sudden this week, bond yields fell unexpectedly. The yield on 10-year debt in Canada and the U.S. dropped by about 25% by Thursday, and stock markets then got panicky that the slumping yields now mean economies in the U.S. and Canada were stalling out. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down about 1.1% this week, the TSX off almost 2%, all in about the last day or so. The concern is that investors, fearing a weakening recovery, are dumping overpriced stocks and buying bonds as a safety measure. Their thinking is that if the economy slows, equities will fall in value, so better to be in fixed income instruments. But all this teeth gnashing about the recovery is overwrought, according to Derek Holt, an economist with the CIBC. His theory is this: the U.S. debt ceiling is about to expire. While Congress is debating increasing government borrowing, the U.S. Federal Reserve holds money in what might be considered a short-term checking account that you or I might hold. The money sits there in case the U.S. government needs extra cash in a hurry. The central bank, for a variety of reasons, wants that account to be about $500 billion. Last year, the same account was almost $2 trillion. Holt says the extra $1.5 trillion is now in circulation and has to go somewhere. So he thinks that the money's being used to buy bonds rather than sit in 0% cash. That's why the market is driving up the demand for bonds, not worry about the recovery. His view: don't panic. The economy's fine. Go back to your lattes. And that's your business news for now.
Thanks for that. That's Phil Dumont at the CBC Business Desk. Quick look at the numbers now. The TSX closed down 229 points. The Dow closed down 259 points. The Canadian dollar closed down 0.34 of a cent to 79.77 cents US, currently holding steady there. Light sweet crude closed up 74 cents to $72.94 a barrel, currently trading at $73.72. Western Canada Select closed up $1.36. Natural gas closed up 9 cents to $3.69. And gold closed down $1.90 to $1,800.20 an ounce. Is currently trading at $1,802.30. Your Daybreak News is coming up next.
This is CBC News. It is 11 degrees in Prince George, 12 in Prince Rupert, and 14 degrees in Fort St. John. Good morning, I'm Bill Fee. A wildfire burning in BC's north-central interior has prompted an evacuation alert. The Mount Porter fire is estimated at 1,600 hectares right now and burning out of control near Omineca Provincial Park. The Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako and the Takla First Nation are asking residents northwest of Germantown Landing to be prepared to leave on short notice. The fire is believed to be caused by lightning. Meantime, another fire continues to threaten homes and transportation routes in the Bulkley-Nechako region. Wednesday's late evacuation order came as a surprise to residents as winds shifted the trajectory of the Bulkley Lake fire. The CBC's Kate Partridge reports.
The evacuation of the Rose Lake area near Burns Lake is ongoing after the order was issued late Wednesday evening. The Bulkley Lake fire is currently estimated to cover approximately 250 hectares in the area south of Highway 16. The evacuation order impacts more than 70 homes. Gloria Brown, Deputy Director of Emergency Support Services for the Burns Lake area, says the center has seen a steady stream of evacuees and emotions are high.
You know, everybody's praying and hoping that they contain it.
Kazda Thomas at the Northwest Fire Center says crews are putting in long hours to fight the fire.
There are 15 firefighters, and the crews are also receiving aerial support.
Jerry Thiessen of the Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako says there are currently no closures to the highway or CN rail lines, but the situation is evolving.
We want to be very careful of that and ask people that as they're going through that area to be cautious.
Thiessen encourages people to stay updated through the BC Wildfires app. Kate Partridge, CBC News, Prince George.
The BC Wildfire Service wants to remind boaters to steer clear of firefighting aircraft working in the Caribou Regional District. There are currently 2 wildfires of note burning near 100 Mile House. Eva Yuguan-Senj has more.
A wildfire near Canham Lake that started about a week ago is now more than 1,100 hectares in size. About 90 kilometers south, the Deca Lake fire covers about 650 hectares. BC wildfire crews are fighting both fires from the air, deploying aircrafts to pick up water from nearby lakes to drop onto the flames. Information Officer Aaron Bull says those enjoying the water need to be careful.
We just ask that recreational boaters or people using other watercraft to just give them plenty of room. Don't get too close to try and take a look at the operations that they're carrying out.
The lakes are still open and safe for recreational use. Bull says there could be consequences for boaters that get in the way of a firefighting aircraft.
The incident could be investigated by the Ministry's Compliance and Enforcement Branch, the Conservation Officer Service, or the RCMP.
Currently, 4 helicopters have been deployed to fight both the Canham Lake and Deca Lake fires. Eva Yuguan-Senj, CBC News, Vancouver.
Buses will take people from Lytton back to their community today to see the fire damage firsthand. The majority of the village, as well as homes in the Lytton First Nation, were destroyed in last week's fire. The Thompson-Nicola Regional District and the Lytton First Nation are organizing the bus tours this morning. They will be leaving from Kamloops, Merritt, Whistler, and Chilliwack. The Blueberry River First Nation says it will still allow resource development in its territory, but it must be done responsibly. Chief Marvin Yahi made the comments at a news conference yesterday. He's celebrating a BC Supreme Court ruling that found resource development in northeastern BC was violating Blueberry River's treaty rights. In particular, a loss of wildlife and forests was found to undermine the nation's ability to hunt, trap, and fish as guaranteed by that treaty. Yahi says the oil and gas-rich region will still be open for development, but now it must be on the nation's terms.
Our treaty always contemplated balance. We support the use of resource on the land in a responsible way that ensures they can continue. We are not against industry. If this is done right, there's plenty of work for everyone.
The court ordered a moratorium on all new development in Blueberry River territory until BC does a better job of protecting treaty rights. A tragic bookend of the COVID-19 pandemic as the Northern Health Region came yesterday. An outbreak at the Rotary Manor in Dawson Creek has ended, the last in long-term care facilities in the province. The care home saw 2 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in residents and 1 death in the resulting June outbreak. 2 residents lost their lives during an outbreak earlier in November of last year. It was the first long-term care facility in northern BC to declare an outbreak. There are now no active outbreaks in the Northern Health Region. Finally, BC is easing visitor restrictions at long-term care homes. As of July 19th, loved ones will no longer need to book in advance for a visit. There will no longer be limits on the number of visitors per residence, and fully immunized friends and family can visit without wearing a mask. Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says there will also be some requirements for staff.
Workers who are not fully vaccinated will be required to adhere to the ongoing infection prevention and control measures that we have now, and that includes wearing masks. As well, they will be they will be required to be tested for COVID-19 using rapid tests 3 times a week.
Dr. Henry says volunteers will need to be fully vaccinated before they can assist inside care homes. It is 6:35. That is the CBC News.
Thanks very much. That's Bill Fee at our Daybreak News desk. Coming up in this half hour of the show, air quality warnings are in effect across the province as a result of wildfire smoke. We'll be hearing some of the best ways to help you breathe easy. And the first new Marvel movie in over a year is returning to theaters. The Black Widow is back. Scarlett Johansson returns, and so does Eli with your first look at that. And Bill, before you get into the highways and roads here, how concerned are you about some of the smoke that's starting to waft its way across the province?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a concern. If you go outside and you want to do some walking or running, it's definitely got me thinking twice about that. Also, it kind of brings up some bad memories of previous wildfire impacts that we've seen in this region too. So I think, there's both that physical impact and there's a mental health component to it as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So stay tuned for the conversation. We'll be having a scientist from the BC CDC join us to talk about some of the ways that you can protect yourself, protect your home, make sure that you're breathing the best quality air that you can. In the meantime, though, what's going on the highways and roads?
Really no forest fire impact just yet, with the exception of access to Monkman Provincial Park, 60 kilometers south of Tumbler Ridge. Road access there is closed off because of the smoke from the nearby wildfires. For the Marine Report, no warnings or advisories today. Light winds increasing 5 to 20 knots, seas to about a meter or less. For BC Ferries, no delays to tell you about this morning, though. Of course, the Northern Expedition is still undergoing repairs, so the Northern Adventure is working the Inside Passage and Haida Gwaii routes on a modified schedule. So if you do have reservations, best to check with Ferries. And BC Hydro says no major Northern BC outages at this time.
It's 6:37 and you're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1. It's been a long time since Marvel fans had a new feature-length movie. Today, Black Widow gets a starring role in a film which is both in theaters and streaming at a premium price. Our Screen Time columnist Eli Glasner is here to talk about the latest superhero film and a classic to mark the passing of director Richard Donner. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, it's been some time. Where do we start here?
Yeah, it was kind of like a step back for me. It's been a while since I've seen a full-length Marvel movie. I've been getting used to all those installments on Disney Plus. But it's interesting. This movie takes place in between the events of Captain America: Civil War and Avengers: Endgame, where we know that was kind of the endgame for Black Widow herself. We begin, though, truly in the past in a wonderful scene in the 1980s with what looks like the perfect prototypical American family. Sitting at the table are the parents, David Harbour and Rachel Weisz. They have 2 wonderful young girls, except it's all a ruse. They're Ruskies. They're secret agents. They've been uncovered by S.H.I.E.L.D. They have to flee. Their cover is blown. And this fake family is a setup for how Natasha and her kid sister Yelena were sucked into the Red Room, a program where they became assassins for, of course, the Soviet Empire. Now, when we catch up with Natasha in present day, she has a clue that leads her to Budapest, where she meets her very much grown-up sort of sister. Let's take a listen.
I've lived a lot of lives, but I'm done running from my past.
I know you're out there.
I know you know I'm out here. So we're gonna talk like grown-ups?
Is that what we are?
Yeah, they're grown-ups, but the Romanoffs, they don't do talking very well, so there's a lot of smashing. There's a wonderful scene where they just redecorate the apartment that they're in with their skulls. After they get that out of their system, they realize that the whole army of Black Widows are hunting them, and the chase is on. Now, this feels like a movie that really Marvel should have made for Scarlett Johansson years ago. I mean, Black Widow has been a critical character. She saved the day multiple times, certainly helped out Iron Man and kind of saved his bacon. To do it finally and do it right, they brought in director Kate Shortland, who is known for her work. She's an Australian director, and I had a chance to actually interview her, and we talked about what was it like, I asked her, when you first met Scarlett Johansson. What did she want out of this film? Let's take a listen.
We talked about trauma and we talked about how do you heal a broken heart and family and violence. So as soon as we talked about that, I was in.
And I think it's that sense of like someone who needs to heal, someone who is broken, that vulnerability that makes this character interesting.
All right, so after all of this time, is this a hit? Will it soar with Marvel fans?
Yeah, I think they're going to be very happy to be back in the MCU. The head of Marvel, Kevin Feige, is hyping this as the beginning of Phase 4, but really this is filling in gaps in the past. Like we finally learn about the red in Black Widow's ledger, and I think what is interesting is that there's always this contradiction with these Marvel movies where you recruit a director known for really interesting, intelligent movies, and then they get kind of sucked into that Marvel way of doing things. So there are two movies here. There is the one of Natasha looking to heal this sense of peace, trying to learn how to trust again, and then there's the other stuff. And even though the setting is different, there is a familiarity to the other stuff. The prison break sequence, the falling fortress, the flying fortress plummeting out of the sky, the battle with the Taskmaster, this supervillain with copycat powers. They're all fine, but I'll tell you, Matt, what kept me watching wasn't the action, which was okay. It was the family. It was the supporting cast. It was Florence Pugh as this snarky sister who has zero patience for the superheroes and their pose downs. There's David Harbour, from Stranger Things, as this over-the-hill super soldier, the Red Guardian. He is hilarious. So we meet him when he meets the family again. He's drunk. He's singing Russian labor songs. And he has to be reminded by his pretend ex-wife, Rachel Weisz, that they're not a family. Take a listen.
So here's what's gonna happen.
Okay, reunion then, huh? And, I want to say something right off the bat. You haven't aged a day, huh? You're just as beautiful and as supple as the day they staged our marriage.
You got fat.
You're just as beautiful and supple as the day they staged our marriage.
Right.
I mean, Harbour is having so much fun. I kind of wish that Scarlett Johansson had that much leeway to just enjoy herself and not just be the stoic super gal. But still, it's a nice return to the MCU. I think people will enjoy it.
That sounds great. And sticking with superheroes, the death of Richard Donner had you going back to 1978 to a comic book movie that was a bold new adventure. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is the one that started it all for Hollywood, for young Eli. This is the Superman movie from 1978, as you said. Richard Donner was known for many things. He directed Goonies. He directed Lethal Weapon. He's a very flexible director. But to talk about it, let's start with some music. Take a listen. That is, of course, the wonderful score by John Williams, the opening theme of Superman, starring Christopher Reeve. And it's interesting, Matt, I was thinking, in a way, the movie is kind of like that music. It's grand, it's majestic, there is this sense of awe, and it's slow. It takes its time. In this movie, it asks patience of the audience. We don't see Superman fly in the costume with the cape until 1 hour and 11 minutes. So you get Krypton, you get Kansas, you have spend time with the Kents, you see how he grows up, you get the awkwardness in high school, you get that sense that he still feels like an outsider, and then you get the wonderful Christopher Reeve as Clark Kent sequences. And it's one of those things that in the comics, it would seem ridiculous, right? Okay, he takes off his glasses and he becomes Superman. No one figures that out. What Reeve did in his performance, the way he would change his body, his stature, his voice, all these things that I think we take for granted, but if you look for them, you'll notice the work that he's doing is really quite something. And then the wonderful energy of those newsroom scenes. Like, that's why Donner spent that time establishing him in Kansas. And then we meet Clark Kent in the newsroom as the reporter, because Clark Kent is the key. He is the key to Superman. He's actually, ironically, what makes Superman believable. And it's interesting because you look at the Marvel heroes, they don't really have time for secret identities anymore. You know, Black Widow is just Black Widow 24/7. Captain America, he's just that guy. Doctor Strange, we don't see him polishing his amulets. He's just fighting the good fight with his wizard powers. But the other side of Superman, that farm boy from Kansas, is actually what made it work. So if you haven't had a chance, it's a wonderful film to reacquaint yourself with a different flavor and pace of super heroic cinema.
Excellent. Thanks so much for bringing this to us, Eli.
You're welcome.
That's Eli Glasner, our CBC entertainment journalist and Screen Time columnist. It's 6:45. You're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1. And from the silver screen to smoky skies, an air quality advisory remains in effect across many areas of northern BC due to wildfire activity. The haze can have a major impact on people, especially those living with chronic conditions. Paula Tate is with the Office of Health and Resource Development at Northern Health.
Wildfire smoke is a mixture of all kinds of different chemicals and particles which can impact our health, not just respiratory health, but also other chronic illnesses and sensitivities. So cardiac conditions, right through to, mental health impacts and, stress and that kind of thing can be impacted by wildfire smoke. Also of note, we're going to have some hot weather, and so both heat and excess smoke together can create extra complications with health conditions.
That was Paula Tate with Northern Health. On the line now to talk with us about how to best prepare for all that bad air is Sarah Henderson. She is the Scientific Director in Environmental Health Services at the BC Centre for Disease Control. Good morning.
Good morning, Matt.
So how does this year compare to previous years when it comes to poor air quality from wildfire smoke?
We have a lot of fire in the province already, and that's quite unusual to have so much fire so early in the year. Having said that, we've had other seasons where we've had a similar amount of fire just later in the season, such as 2017 and 2018. So far, the smoke from the fires has been quite bad in the central interior of the province, but we haven't had those days where the smoke is bad all over the province like we did in 2017 and 2018. The smoke has been a bit more transient. That may change, but so far we haven't seen those really, really poor air quality conditions yet.
Right, and as you just mentioned there, the central interior is getting the brunt of it right now. What should people be doing? Let's start with people who may be a bit more vulnerable. So if you have a pre-existing condition, what should you be doing to protect yourself and to prepare yourself for this stretch?
What you really want to do is avoid breathing as much smoke as possible.
Okay.
And one of the best ways to do that is to try to create a cleaner airspace at home where you spend a lot of your time, especially in your bedroom where you're going to be sleeping overnight. And that means closing the windows, hopefully running a portable air cleaner or a box fan air filter that you've made yourself to clean some of that smoke out of the indoor air so that you're not breathing as much of it. And then if you are going to be outside and it is quite smoky, consider wearing a respirator like an N95 or a KN95 or a really well-fitted 3-layer disposable or cloth mask, and that'll help filter out some of the smoke you're breathing outdoors.
Okay, could you talk a little bit about that homemade box fan filter that you were talking about? Because, not everyone may be able to afford, or they may be not available regular manufactured air filters. So how did those work?
Yeah, that's exactly why we did this research at the BC CDC and UBC. we wanted to test whether or not this kind of do-it-yourself solution could be effective. And all you do is take a 20-inch box fan and tape a 20-inch by 20-inch by 1-inch furnace filter on there. It's got to be a pretty high-quality filter, and then turn the fan on, and that will clean the particles out of the air quite effectively. We have some instructions for doing that on our BCCDC website.
Okay. And you also mentioned keeping windows shut. This is happening at the same time that there is a kind of an unprecedented streak of hot weather going through the province. So which should be the priority here, protecting against the heat or protecting against smoke inhalation?
Yeah, it's a really tough one, I know. And what we have is two different competing risks, unfortunately, along with COVID, which is a third competing risk.
Right, yeah.
Most people being too hot is going to be more dangerous than inhaling smoke. But for some people, especially those with poorly controlled asthma or COPD, inhaling smoke can also be quite dangerous. So first of all, you have to understand who you are and which of those risks is more important to you. What we really want to try to do is have people in cleaner, cooler places as much as possible. So if you can create a cleaner, cooler airspace at home, that's going to be the best. If you can seek cleaner, cooler air respite in your community, at a library or community center, we really encourage people to do that. And then you have to think about, during the day and in the evening, the smoke tends to be worse during the day, which if you're trying to keep cool air in your home is a good time to have the windows closed. And then open up the windows at night when that cooler air is around to let it in, and that tends to be the less smoky conditions. That is not always true, but, I recognize that it's really hard just to try to balance these things and figure out what you're supposed to do. I wish I had a perfect solution for everybody.
Right. It's a juggling act for sure. You also mentioned that wearing masks is something that people should consider doing while outdoors. Is it something that maybe doing while indoors could be helpful as well?
Yes, if you don't, if it's quite smoky and you got to have those windows open and you're not able to clean the smoke out, then wearing a mask will help to protect you. You just have to ensure that it's a good mask and it's well fitted. The key thing is that the air has to pass through the material of the mask, not around the material of the mask. So it's got to be quite well fitted to your face. And the problem with that advice is that makes for a pretty uncomfortable mask. So if you're hot and feeling pretty bothered by the heat, and then you're wearing a mask and you're feeling like you can't really catch your breath or you're too hot, it's still going to be better for you to take that mask off and be able to breathe freely, even if it's smoky air.
How else can people prepare for extended periods of poor air quality?
One of the key things is knowing where to get good information, and again, we have a lot of resources about this on the BCCDC website, but you can get air quality alerts from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy throughout most of British Columbia, or in the Metro Vancouver area, you get them from Metrovan, and those are emailed or texted to your phone, so you know right away if there's been a smoky skies bulletin or advisory issued for your area. I also really encourage people to check the wildfire smoke forecast. So if you Google Firework Canada forecast, you will get a link that shows you what is expected to happen over the next 3 days with these smoky conditions. So you can kind of understand, is it going to be super smoky in my area? And you can go through it hour by hour to kind of get a sense of during the day when that smoke may be there and when it won't be. And just use those kinds of tools, the Air Quality Health Index as well, to plan your activities as best as possible under non-ideal circumstances.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing some of these insights with us.
Thanks, Matt.
That's Sarah Henderson. She is the Scientific Director for Environmental Health Services at the BC CDC. How about you? How have you been dealing with the poor air quality and wildfire smoke? We'd love to hear from you. You can email daybreaknorth@cbc.ca. You can also call our listener line 1-866-340-1932, or we're on Facebook and Twitter at Daybreak North. It's time now to go to trivia, where a dealer in onions is a good judge of scallions. This week on Trivia, we've been getting our green thumbs dirty and digging deep into our virtual garden, asking you about the various veggies that grow here in BC. We're looking for someone to submit their answers and potentially win a Daybreak mug, and you can let us know if you think you have the answer by emailing daybreaknorth@cbc.ca. This vegetable masquerades as a fruit. Its leafy stalks have a tart taste and can be eaten raw. However, those stalks are almost exclusively used in desserts paired with sweet fruits. What is the name of this vegetable? You can email your answer to daybreaknorth@cbc.ca. And while you do, here is Prince with Raspberry Beret. That's Prince with Raspberry Beret. Today on Trivia, we are looking for the vegetable that masquerades as a fruit. Its leafy stalks have a tart taste and can be eaten raw. Correct answer to that question is rhubarb. It belongs to the buckwheat family, and it is a relative of plants such as sorrel and knotweed. Congratulations to Craig Evanoff. You are the winner of this week's trivia contest. We're coming up on World Report here, but first we will check in at our Daybreak News Desk with Bill Fee.
Good morning, Matt. Wildfire burning in the north central interior has prompted an evacuation alert from the regional district of Beauclair-Nechako. The Mount Porter fire is estimated at 1,600 hectares and is burning out of control near Almanica Provincial Park. An air quality advisory remains in effect across many areas of the north because of wildfire activity. The haze can have major impacts on people, especially those with chronic conditions.
Thanks very much. That's Bill Fee at our Daybreak News Desk. Coming up after World Report, the impacts of climate change are impossible to ignore these days, with wildfires and record-breaking temperatures, seasonal flooding, and dramatic weather events becoming more and more common. The question on everyone's mind right now is, how do we keep our communities safe? Coming up, Craig Brown joins us to talk through some of the unique challenges and possible adaptations for urban centers like Prince George. That's coming up. Coming up in this half hour of the show, how do we adapt to a changing climate? We speak with a researcher about the challenges facing urban centers like Prince George. And BC's Supreme Court has ruled energy projects in northeastern BC can no longer move forward without the cooperation of First Nations. And now those First Nations have laid out their vision for the future of development. We'll have that story at 7:20. First, though, let's check in with Bill Fee at our Daybreak News Desk.
Good morning, Matt. A wildfire burning in the north central interior has prompted an evacuation alert. The Mount Porter fire is estimated at 1,600 hectares right now, burning out of control near Almanica Provincial Park. And the Blueberry River First Nation says it will still allow resource development in its territory, but it has to be done responsibly. Chief Marvin Yehé made the comments at a news conference yesterday.
Thanks very much. That's Bill Fee at our Daybreak News Desk. We'll take a quick look at the temperatures around the region right now. It's sunny and 13 degrees in Prince George, 13 degrees also in Quesnel. In Prince Rupert, it's cloudy and 13 degrees. On Haida Gwaii, 15 degrees in Sandspit, light rain and 13 degrees in Masset. The Bella Bella Airport, it is misty and 12 degrees. In Bella Coola, it's mainly sunny and 13. For the coastal inland, mainly sunny and 15 degrees in Terrace, at the Terrace Airport between Terrace and Kitimat. The Stewart Airport, it is 14 degrees. In Smithers, 15 degrees. In Burns Lake, it is 10 degrees. In Fort St. James, it is 15, and in Mackenzie, it is also 15. Up in the Peace, mostly cloudy and 16 degrees at the Fort St. John Airport. In Dawson Creek, mainly sunny and 13 degrees. In Chetwynd, cloudy and 16. And in Fort Nelson, it is partly cloudy and 15. At Dease Lake, it is cloudy and 12 degrees.
A largely smoky and hot day for much of northern BC. Heat warnings are in effect for the north and south Peace as well. Smoky skies bulletins are in effect for Prince George and the central interior. Expect sunshine and clouds later on with highs to 31. North Caribou and Quesnel also under that smoky skies bulletin. It'll be sunny and smoky with increasing clouds this afternoon and highs reaching 32. For the Robson Valley, there is a chance of thunderstorms this afternoon, highs of 32, and an extreme UV index as well. Sun and cloud for the Lakes District and Smithers, highs up around 29. Across the Peace in Fort Nelson, sunny with highs to 34 degrees with the humidex, and there is a risk of late-day thunderstorm activity. Clouds over coastal inland sections, highs getting up to 25 today. Near the water, a mainly cloudy day and a chance of showers with highs around the 15-degree mark.
Thanks very much. That's Bill Fee at our Daybreak News Desk. We'll hear more from him at the bottom of the hour. It's 7:13, and you're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1. The impacts of changing climates are impossible to ignore these days, with wildfires, record-breaking temperatures, seasonal flooding, and weather events becoming more and more common. The question on everyone's mind right now is, how do we adapt to it, and how do we keep our communities safe? A group of climate change researchers and experts have collaborated on a new project exploring exactly that subject. Sarah Breen is a contributor to the report on rural communities.
So I think there's a couple of challenges for rural places, and I think the first one is that when it comes to climate change adaptation or climate change resilience, a lot of the resources that exist out there are designed for urban centers or communities that have bigger capacity. You know, some small communities don't have a large staff or don't have any staff, and so it can be very challenging to use some of the existing planning guidebooks or toolkits. And there's so much variation by place. The needs, the priorities, the risks, they all differ greatly depending on what community you're in. We do have the opportunity in rural places to really integrate those green spaces and I guess, amplify how they can work in our favor. How do we use the natural landscape to help protect our watershed? How do we work with the interface area, so the area surrounding our communities, to make more natural fire breaks? It looks a little bit different than in urban settings, but it's a similar concept of how do we use and develop the natural environment to our advantage to help our communities. Rural communities are being impacted by climate change right now. And, there's no new normal. What there is going to be increasing uncertainty and change. One of the amazing things with rural places is people's willingness to jump in and get things done. If we look at any of the small communities across BC in particular, you've got these individuals that just make things happen. So when we're planning and trying to adapt, really that need to have an open and inclusive dialogue. And I'm hoping that this report underscores the importance of local knowledge and local participation in climate change.
That was Sarah Breen. She is the Regional Innovation Chair in Rural Economic Development at Selkirk College. In the meantime, Craig Brown took the lead on the Cities and Towns chapter of this report and speaks with us today about the challenges facing urban centres like Prince George. Good morning.
Good morning.
So this report, it covers a lot of topics, but one that keeps coming up is infrastructure. So could you tell me a little bit about the challenges that are facing communities like Prince George?
Sure. For many of Canada's communities, they're home to, aging infrastructure that is really not ready for our current and future climate. So there's sewers that are too small and buildings that don't have air conditioning, electricity grids that are affected by ice storms. And so retrofitting and replacing all of this is going to be extremely costly. There's a report out that finds that it'll cost about $5.3 billion per year just at the municipal level to try and retrofit some of this infrastructure. So certain communities, even if they raise taxes, they couldn't, get ready for the future climate conditions. The good news is that for every dollar you spend now, we've found in our cost and benefits chapter of our report that you save about $5 to $6 in the future. So that's great news and should incentivize people to take action. And the other piece of good news is that Infrastructure Canada and others are providing funding for this type of work. So down here in the Lower Mainland, you've got the City of Surrey, Delta, and the Semiahmoo First Nation who received $76 million to do a coastal adaptation strategy that uses hard infrastructure like seawalls and dikes, but also floodable parks and nature-based solutions. So the work is underway, I think, for communities like Prince George, just like many others. It's capacity and resources, but I know there's some good leadership there and action is already underway.
Right. And when you talk about infrastructure, I mean, it brings to mind images, roads, sewers, power grids, that sort of thing. But the report is also pointing to green infrastructure that is also an important component in cities. So what is the connection between green spaces, green infrastructure, and resilience to climate change?
That's a great question. So the various benefits of what we call green infrastructure or nature-based adaptation are becoming better understood. So we've got to identify and value these natural assets. So, in cities, it could be wetlands, trees, parks. In Prince George, it would definitely include an aquifer as well. Cities need to work to protect these assets that are going to change or be affected as the climate changes. And a good example of that comes from the city of Mississauga. They used a engineering risk assessment tool to do a risk assessment of 3 of their parks to understand what are the risks to these parks as the climate changes and what do we need to do to reduce those risks in the future. Another great example comes from the city of Nanaimo in British Columbia, which it sought to kind of assign a financial value to this wetland that it has called the Buttertubs Marsh Conservation Area. And what they found is that the amount of stormwater that it retains and flooding that it prevents, if you were to build an engineered system to do the same, it would cost the city between $6 and $8 million. So examples like this are just strengthening the ability of cities to say, our natural assets, our trees, our parks, our wetlands, our aquifers, they provide this much monetary value to us, so let's protect them and let's leverage them. So it's a really exciting area, and the Cities and Towns chapter, as well as the Ecosystem Services chapter and others in our report cover this.
Right. And while there is a lot of work being done in communities to adapt to climate change, the report says that these adaptations aren't keeping pace. So what exactly does that mean? What does it look like to keep pace with climate change?
That's a great question. So for our report, which is at changingclimate.ca, we assessed as much of the existing knowledge on this topic as we could. And like you said, we found that there's generally an adaptation deficit where the amount of action in my case in cities and towns, but we found in a number of national areas, the action just isn't at the same level it needs to be to deal with these future risks. And so what we find is that we're pretty good at planning. And so, a number of local and regional governments and First Nations in British Columbia, the province itself has just released the climate preparedness and adaptation strategy. So we're showing that we can do this, Prince George included, but we need across all sectors to really accelerate our implementation. So to move from planning into action, we sometimes say. And so our report, again, at changingclimate.ca, it links to a map of adaptation actions that have been taken across Canada. It was co-produced by Natural Resources Canada and Canadian Centre for Climate Services. There's a number of fantastic examples there, but what we need to do is really, it's an all-hands-on-deck situation. So our data and knowledge products need to improve. The amount of resources that we dedicate towards this need to improve. Our human resources, need to improve. And so we see that. We see, especially me, I've got to work with a number of leaders in local government, for example, and you're very inspired by these folks. But we just got to keep going, and we've got to really accelerate it because, as we saw in the recent heat event, things are coming maybe even a little more quickly than we anticipated.
What type of actions are you hoping to inspire with this report?
We don't want folks to have to reinvent the wheel. We want them to jump off or stand on the shoulders of all of the other giants that have kind of come before. And I think it does that in a great way by showing here's how we understand the impacts, here's kind of the adaptation options that have been pursued to date, and here's what we think are some of the emerging areas. And I think for me, one of the really important parts of this is that it encourages our readers and those decision makers to really take an equitable approach to their adaptation planning. And so that means being inclusive from the start. It means making sure that any actions that you do end up resourcing and developing benefit folks equally. And we've seen really good examples of this, including in the area of including urban Indigenous populations. With more than half of Canada's Indigenous populations live in a metropolitan area of at least 30,000 people. And so we've now seen, big cities like Calgary and Toronto have recognized that they need to more meaningfully engage with Indigenous leadership on climate resilience and adaptation in order to achieve their goals. And so we've seen some promising examples of that. Our report contains promising examples of that, and we really hope that it'll just inspire much more, equitable and effective adaptation action across BC and across the country.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing those insights with us this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you, Matt.
Craig Brown is the project lead for the Climate Change and Health Adaptation Planning for Vancouver Coastal Health. He was the coordinating lead author for cities and towns in the National Interest Report, Canada in a Changing Climate. It's 7:23. You're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1. And a landmark victory was delivered to the Blueberry First Nation last week. BC Supreme Court found that the industrial development in the Northeast infringed on their treaty rights and ordered the province to enter into negotiations with Blueberry River before approving any new projects. That means no new oil and gas wells, no new pipelines, and possibly no new developments in connection to the Site C Dam. But Blueberry River says this ruling doesn't mean the end of industrial development, just that the economic needs must now be balanced alongside environmental ones. They held a press conference in Vancouver yesterday. Here are some of the highlights, starting with elected Chief Marvin Yahi.
We will not accept anything less than full enforcement of our rights as recognized by the courts. The government has failed its obligations for the past 2 decades, despite long notices. The government can no longer authorize industrial activities in breach of our treaty rights. Our treaty always contemplated balance. We support the use of resource on the land in a responsible way that ensures they can continue. We are not against industry. If this is done right, there's plenty of work for everyone. The province can no longer ignore us. We have a seat at the table.
I'm going to hand it right back over to Megan Giltro, lead legal counsel for Blueberry River First Nations. She's going to talk more about the case.
It's such an honor to be here today, and it is such an honor to have been able to work with Blueberry River First Nations to have pursued their vision. This really was Blueberry's vision. Blueberry came to us knowing that the balance that was inherent in Treaty 8, the balance that their ancestors and the Treaty 8 ancestors, who were smart negotiators, who fought hard, negotiated hard for a balance in Treaty 8, and Blueberry knew that that balance had been lost, and they came to us to ask for help. And we do now have a precedent-setting victory, and it is a complete vindication of the view Blueberry has had, and that I know the other Treaty 8 First Nations have long been concerned with. Blueberry is not the only nation that has faced really what the court called death by 1,000 cuts. And we now know as a matter of law that the way of life that was negotiated, the balance that was negotiated in the treaty, it cannot be stolen by cut after cut after cut. And there is a stop now.
Next, I'd like to introduce Norma Pyle, who is the former lands manager and former councillor for Blueberry River First Nations. And she's been working tirelessly on this court case and historically for Treaty 8 nations on land stewardship.
Indigenous people have survived and thrived for more than 10,000 years where I live in northeastern BC. We have found ways to adapt, to survive, to persist. This victory is yet another tremendous example of Indigenous persistence in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The victory is for Blueberry River First Nations' current membership, and more importantly, for our future generations. It is a victory for our sister nations in Northeast BC and really across Canada. It is a victory for all of the people of British Columbia because it is a victory for the land, for the wildlife, for the water, all elements critical to our treaty right. Over the years of my work in my community as lands manager and as a leader, I had the great privilege of hearing traditional ecological knowledge from our members, of being taken out on the land and shown how it used to be, how this place right here was a good place to hunt, was a good place to camp. I believe that if there can be actual land management and planning done, and not just a rush to extract the bounty of the land without consideration of the future, that resource development can happen sustainably while maintaining and managing our treaty rights. When we look at something like our Blueberry River, it starts in the wetland muskeg. All its tributaries start in the muskeg. So over time, when logging companies are allowed to log right up to these wetlands, you see a decline in the muskeg's ability to function, ultimately resulting in low river flow. This decline in flow impacts the plants, the wildlife that have for millennia relied on this water course. When we look at an ecosystem like a wetland or muskeg or old growth forest, management practices can, and now as a result of this decision, must be developed to retain its integrity and to maintain its function. We place a value on it. We have to ensure that the value isn't going forward simply of the monetary kind. Instead, the value has to be directly connected to our treaty right. Blueberry River First Nations should never have had to waste precious resources, including the time and energy of its members, to get here. I'm excited to see how the province responds to this ruling. It is my strong hope they view this as the first step towards real reconciliation in our territory. Thank you.
That was Blueberry River First Nation Lands Manager Norma Pyle. Before that, lawyer Megan Giltro and Blueberry River Chief Marvin Yehee. They were reacting to a landmark court ruling in favor of Blueberry River. BC's Supreme Court has found that the province has continually violated the treaty rights of Blueberry River by failing to protect wildfire in BC's northeast and by approving industrial projects without Blueberry River's blessing. You can read more about that on our website, cbc.ca/BC. We're coming up here on 7:30 and your Daybreak News. Coming up after that, families of residents of long-term care homes are thrilled with the news that they can now spontaneously see their loved ones. Later, we'll be speaking with the daughter of a 98-year-old woman and a doctor who spends her days caring for the elderly. And historic heat waves and massive wildfires, and it's only the beginning of July. So what does this mean for our environment? Coming up, we'll be diving into the pyro CB clouds appearing in the sky because of the massive wildfires. That's all coming up after your Daybreak News, which is coming up next.
This is CBC News from Prince George. It is 13 degrees in Prince George and Prince Rupert, 16 degrees this hour in Fort St. John. Good morning, I'm Bill Fee. Fire continues to threaten homes and transportation routes in the Bulkley-Nechako region. Wednesday night's late evacuation order came as a surprise to residents of the 70 affected homes as winds shifted the trajectory of the Bulkley Lake fire. The fire is currently estimated to cover 250 hectares in an area south of Highway 16. Gloria Brown is Deputy Director of Emergency Support Services in the Burns Lake area. She says the center has seen a steady stream of evacuees and emotions are high. The area under evacuation order also runs south of Highway 16, a major corridor connecting the northwest to Prince George and the rest of the province. Jerry Thiessen of the Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako says there are currently no closures to the highway or the CN line, but the situation is evolving.
We want to be very careful of that and ask people that as they're going through that area to be cautious.
Thiessen is encouraging people to stay updated through the BC Wildfires app. Meantime, a fire burning in BC's north-central interior has prompted an evacuation alert. The Mount Porter fire is estimated at 1,600 hectares and burning out of control near Omineeka Provincial Park. The Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako and the Takla First Nation are asking residents northwest of Germanson Landing to be prepared on short notice to leave. The fire is believed to be caused by lightning. A resident in Canham Lake near 100 Mile House says she and others in the community are concerned about their safety. The wildfire near Canham Lake started about a week ago, and it's now more than 1,000 hectares in size. The BC Wildfire Service provides an update twice a day on fires of note, but as Christina Jung reports, some feel it's not enough to keep rural residents safe.
Right now, there are over a dozen fires that could potentially pose a threat to public safety, and BC Wildfire Service continues to provide an update twice a day on those fires through their website. Leanne Salenbach is the owner of a resort on the southwest end of Canham Lake. She said residents in the community have been keeping a close eye on the fire nearby, but the lack of information has them concerned for their safety.
Our only thing right now is that we need the information flowing. We need to know, what is going on, because we can't, there's so many sleepless nights. People can't just go out in their boats every other hour to look at what's going on.
She said by the time residents get their updates, the information is already outdated. Erin Bull is the information officer with the BC Wildfire Service. She said she understands the frustrations, but the agency is providing the updates as fast as they can.
As soon as we have new information available, we will make it available to the public as well.
She said resources from another fire nearby have been sent to Canham Lake, so more updates can be expected. Christina Jung, CBC News, Vancouver.
An air quality advisory remains in effect across many areas of northern BC due to the wildfire activity. That haze can have major impact on people, especially those living with chronic health conditions. Paula Tate is with the Office of Health and Resource Development at Northern Health.
Cardiac conditions through to, mental health impacts and, stress and that kind of thing can be impacted by wildfire smoke. Also of note, we're going to have some hot weather, and so both heat and excess smoke together can create extra complications with health conditions.
Tate says reducing outdoor activities, staying cool, and using an air purifier indoors if possible can all help out during the heat and smoke. The BC government is being urged not to appeal a landmark court ruling halting new industrial development that doesn't have the approval of a First Nation whose territory has long been the focus of resource development. Chief Marvin Yehi of the Blueberry River First Nation says the industrial development without regard for the nation's treaty rights has been going on for decades. He says if the provincial government is truly committed to reconciliation, it will not appeal the ruling. BC's Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation says it's reviewing the court's decision and will be reaching out to the First Nation in the future. A tragic bookend to the COVID-19 pandemic in Northern Health came yesterday. An outbreak at the Rotary Manor in Dawson Creek has ended, the last in a long-term care facility in BC. The care home saw 2 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in residents and 1 death as a result of the June outbreak. 2 residents lost their lives during an outbreak in November of last year. It was the first long-term care facility in the north to declare an outbreak. There are now no active outbreaks in the Northern Health region. Meantime, the province is lifting virtually all the restrictions on visits to long-term care homes. Health Minister Adrian Dix says the changes will go a long way to improving connections between residents and loved ones.
The first significant change is that visitors will no longer need to schedule or book in advance to visit loved ones, and the limit on the number of visitors for each resident will be removed. Fully immunized visitors can visit with residents without a mask.
Large facility-wide social events and gatherings will also be allowed to go ahead. The changes will take effect July 19th. It is 7:35. That is the CBC News.
Thanks very much. That's Bill Fee at our Daybreak News desk. Coming up in this half hour of the show, spontaneity is the word of the day for residents of long-term care homes and their loved ones. The province says it's now safe to open up facilities to visits when the mood strikes residents or their loved ones. So we'll be hearing more about that coming up. And forest fires are creating their own lightning storms in a record heat wave. What do scientists think about the past 2 weeks in BC? We'll be talking clouds, wildfires, and lightning strikes at 7:45. First, though, Bill, what's going on the highways and roads?
No major issues to tell you about on the highways and roads. So wildfire activity has closed access to Monkman Provincial Park, as we've been discussing earlier this week. No closures or advisories for Highway 16 near the Bulkley Lake fire, but that is something to keep in mind if you're traveling through the area. On the marine report, no warnings or advisories. Wind light increasing 5 to 15 knots and seas to about a meter. BC Ferries, no delays to tell you about this morning. BC Hydro reporting no major outages in the north right now.
It's 7:37 and you're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1. I'm Matt Allen. And as you heard this morning in the news, an outbreak at the Rotary Manor in Dawson Creek has ended, the last in a long-term care facility in BC. Some more good news is yesterday the province announced some new freedoms for residents and their loved ones living in care. One of the big ones, no more having to book appointments in advance. Mary Ellen McSween's mother is 98 and lives in a care home in North Vancouver.
Oh, well, I think it's going to be fantastic. I mean, it's for, everybody in the care home, the staff included, because I think that having been able to go in and have my visits, that's something that they've expressed, that it's been really challenging, not just for the residents, but for the staff as well. So I think it's exciting, an exciting bit of news for sure. I think just having a little more flexibility is really going to be a huge thing, though. Just having to pre-book appointments and stuff like that has been a little difficult for some members of the family. And I think if you can be a bit more spontaneous, it's going to improve things on both sides. So
we are now joined by Dr. Maria Chung. She's a geriatrician who works in long-term care homes. She's also UBC's Clinical Associate Professor of Geriatric Medicine. Good morning, Dr. Chung. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. No worries.
All right. So what are your thoughts about the changes coming for people in long-term care homes?
I think it's very great. It's just been so difficult on seniors in long-term care with the limits on visits, and it's been really hard on the caregivers as well to have to book, and then you have a limited amount of time, and only one person can go at any one time. So it's really been very hard. I mean, the whole lockdown during COVID has been really, really tough on seniors. They have suffered a decline in physical, mental, and emotional health during this time because the family are part of the care team. You know, they provide stimulation. They even provide some hands-on care, say if you have a loved one that is very slow to eat and the care facility are not able to spend maybe an hour to help them have a meal. Family have been there to do that. They've been there to help them walk and, you know, give them some mental stimulation by speaking with them and spending time with them. And for a lot of people that are in care facilities, they do have significant cognitive impairment. So telephone and Zoom contact really is not adequate. And once a week visits were really also very difficult.
So how much of a difference will all of those things that you just mentioned there make to the physical and mental health of those residents?
I think it'll be really good for their morale. I think it'll also be really good for the staff morale as well to see people coming in and out and being a little more spontaneous. You know, there will still be some screening measures, so people will have to demonstrate that they've been double vaccinated. Those that are not double vaccinated will be able to visit, but they will have to, mask and socially distance. Everybody will have to mask in the common areas. And then the nursing staff, the staff at the care facilities who still haven't been vaccinated will still have to follow the same precautions as before. So I think it's a good balance between opening things up and allowing things to return to normal, but also being cautious. There will also be screening for future outbreaks by the public health office. And if there is an outbreak, then the same restrictions will be reinstated.
Now, speaking of employees and staff, Dr. Henry announced that some employees in long-term care will be allowed to work in more than one facility. How safe is that modification to a single site order?
Yeah, well, as you remember the beginning, that's how the virus spread between facilities where staff work part-time in multiple facilities to make ends meet. And because the disease can be spread by asymptomatic people, they unwittingly brought it from one place to another. The people that will be able to work in more than one facility will, from what I understand, need to be double vaccinated. And it will also not be their choice as to which facilities to work in. There will be a very strict criteria for which facilities require extra staffing. So, for instance, if there is a shortage of staff and there are people that are double vaccinated who have the time and are willing to work there, that will be allowed. But it's not as if it will go back to the way it was before, where people just kind of moved all over the place. So I think that that certainly is necessary because there will be staffing shortages from time to time because of holidays. Now people are able to go away or because of illness. So I think it's necessary to have that in order to ensure that the number of hours per care per resident doesn't decrease.
Okay. And in terms of the updated and changing rules, how challenging do you think it will be for families to navigate things as they change? We just heard from Mary Ellen McSween, who said that only 2 weeks ago she was permitted to bring her grandson in to see his great-grandmother. And there are some concerns expressed about how those different interpretations of rules, perhaps in long-term care facilities, can be confusing. So what will it be like for families to have to navigate that?
Yeah, it's difficult because, I go from care facility to care facility in my work, and I will hear from caregivers in one facility who said, I wanted to have essential visitor status, and they got it. And then other people would say, well, I tried to get essential visitor status, and they essentially had the same request and the same care needs that were being met for their loved one, and they were refused. So it is very confusing. I guess the main thing to try and do is to increase the voices of family members. So in one of the recommendations from the Office of the Seniors Advocate was that all facilities have a family council so that they are able to have sort of a voice in what is going on in the facility, and I think that would go towards addressing it. A lot of care facilities already have a family council, but some don't. So I think that would be something that would be ideal. The other thing is I don't want to criticize individual care facilities because only they know what their limitations are, and it may be the the way that the facility is built, or their difficulty with staffing levels, or something else that's causing them to be a bit more cautious. They may also have been a site of a major outbreak, so they may be a bit gun-shy from that point of view as well.
Sure, yeah. Could you speak a little bit to how maybe the pandemic has changed long-term care facilities in terms of how prepared they are should something like this were to happen again? I mean, if there's a variant that comes up that kind of sets us back to square one, how prepared do you think long-term care facilities generally are to handle that better than they were initially?
Really were. I think they're certainly going to be more vigilant. I think there is also a path now. There's a plan for providing PPEs, for instance, and for the public health office to have SWAT teams. When you have a facility that has an outbreak, they immediately descend on the facility and help them sort out what they need and make sure that they get what they need, whether it be staffing or PPE or help with guidance in terms of hygiene. So I think that will be helpful. But I think it's mainly the surveillance that's really being increased. Now, a lot of things they're not going to be able to do immediately, but obviously a lot of facilities in BC are aging, and there are a lot of them that when they were built, they have, double beds, not double beds, but rooms with 3 people in it or 2 people in it. And nowadays, I think if people are building facilities, they will sort of try and get, more single bedrooms, because it's obviously very difficult to ensure social isolation if you're sharing a room with someone. And same thing with shared bathrooms. A lot of times people will have shared bathrooms. Sometimes also it's difficult to clean the place or to socially isolate someone who's sick, especially if they're wandering because of their dementia. So I think a lot of those things will go into construction of future facilities or modifications of future facilities as well. But I think one of the big things is a recognition that, if you can keep people at home with supports in the community, we'll always need care facilities. We'll always need them. But if you can keep people at home for longer by putting in supports and supporting the caregivers, it's better for everybody.
All right. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a good day.
You
Bye-bye.
too. You too. That was Dr. Maria Chung. She's a geriatrician and UBC's Clinical Associate Professor of Geriatric Medicine. It's 7:47. You're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1. The past 2 weeks have been something that British Columbians have never seen. Temperatures almost reaching 50 degrees in parts of the southern interior. Heat in the mid-40s for days, and more than 200 wildfires sparked. All of this has caught the eye of scientists who study what are called pyro-CB clouds that form with these fires. David Peterson is a meteorologist with the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory in Monterey, California, and he joins us this morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. What activities or events have you been able to observe with these fires in BC over the last week?
So the preceding heat wave that led up to these fires, of course, was extremely intense, and that allowed conditions to dry out rapidly, and the fires developed. But what's most noteworthy is that as these large heat waves begin to break down, you end up with this transition period where the fires are still burning intensely and it's hot near the ground, but the atmosphere above those fires becomes increasingly unstable. And so that provides conditions favorable for developing thunderstorms that are actually driven by the wildfires themselves.
How do those conditions and what we've seen compare to what we saw in August of 2017, which was one of BC's worst wildfire seasons ever?
So there were many similarities. In fact, it was eerily similar in many ways. There were 3 wildfires that produced these wildfire-driven thunderstorms, which we call pyrocumulonimbus or pyro-CB for short. And one of them produced a PyroCB that was extremely intense. This was the Sparks Lake fire near Kamloops in the south. And that storm was so large that the resulting cloud from that spread north over much of British Columbia. And so that fire and PyroCB storm was comparable, if not bigger, than those observed on August 12, 2017, which was one of the largest events in history. The only difference in this case is that we only had one giant PyroCB storm instead of four, like we had during that peak event in 2017.
And what do you make of this stuff happening so early in the summer?
Yeah, so it's early, and a lot of that has to do with getting this anomalous heat wave in place. But it's not too terribly unusual to see PyroCB storms happen in the month of June. It's just this was one of the earliest cases of having one of these really, really big PyroCBs that produces a smoke plume that is injected to altitudes above, say, jet aircraft cruising altitude.
And do we have any greater understanding of what they do in the upper atmosphere?
So that's actually one of the biggest questions in the science community right now is what is the role of these wildfire-driven thunderstorms in the climate system? And so we know that they act like a giant chimney. So you can imagine the smoke being released by the wildfire near the ground is fed directly into this thunderstorm updraft. And then it's injected at whatever altitude that thunderstorm tops out at. And so in the case of this past week, we're talking, 16 kilometers or so. Same thing back in 2017. And so the plume from this past week, over the course of about 4 or 5 days, reached into the central United States and then eventually off the Atlantic coast. The plume from the big event in 2017 was actually so large that it worked its way around the entire globe and persisted for almost 10 months. And so that's where you get this similarity between thunderstorms driven by wildfires and the plumes that result from volcanic eruptions in terms of their persistence.
Wow. And so what happens to all of that smoke and ash that you're describing when it does get into the atmosphere?
So the really big events will inject the smoke above the level of the atmosphere where the weather occurs into the next level, which is called the stratosphere. And once you put smoke or any other sort of aerosol particle like that up in that layer, it takes a long time to remove it. It's a very stable layer of the atmosphere, and things tend to sit there for a while. And so once you have this material at that altitude, it can persist for weeks to months. In a case in Australia, in that really big fire season they had, the plume actually lasted for more than a year. So that's why there's this question in the climate community of, how does this all relate to the heating and cooling effects in the atmosphere and that sort of thing.
And do we have any sort of understanding about why the heat dome, which is the main cause of everything that's happening right now, why that occurred?
Well, so that heat dome is associated with what meteorologists call a ridge of high pressure. What was unique about this case is that heat dome was displaced so far to the north and was so extreme in terms of its magnitude, and it also persisted. So it's what meteorologists call a blocking pattern. The large-scale weather pattern wasn't really moving, and that allowed the heat to not only build but persist for several days. And so that sort of environment is what sets the stage for the wildfires. Of course, this was an extreme example of that. And so now as we look to the rest of the fire season, we have to look for other periods of similar weather, maybe not as intense, but there's the potential then for this wildfire-driven thunderstorm situation to occur again in the months ahead.
What do you, as a meteorologist, what do you make of some of the temperatures that we've seen? They're the hottest that we've ever recorded in Canada. When you see this, what do you think?
Well, I think any meteorologist was awestruck in terms of the magnitude of the heat and how far north it reached. Not only across Western Canada, but also the Pacific Northwest of the United States. And of course, that's created some discussion in the community on how frequent does this sort of thing happen? Can we expect it to happen again? That's more a question for the science experts, or climate experts rather. But from my standpoint, looking at wildfires, when you see something like that develop over Western Canada, you immediately start thinking, okay, the wildfire potential is increasing, You're rapidly drying out fuels. You're providing that opportunity for any spark to generate a fire that gets going quickly. And then, of course, once that heat wave finally breaks down, you get into that transition phase where you can get this period of extremely dangerous fire weather where these thunderstorms can also develop over the fires.
Thanks so much for sharing some of these insights with us this morning.
All right, thanks very much for having me.
That was David Peterson. He is a meteorologist with the U.S. Naval Research Lab in Monterey, California. It's 7:54. You're listening to Daybreak on CBC Radio 1, and it's time now for the Daybreak playlist, where we pick the music theme and you pick the music that somehow fits in with that theme. This week, the playlist puts the backup vocalist into the spotlight. Mona Ayer sent us a note with this suggestion. She writes, bar none, Lisa Fischer. Stones, Tina Turner, Luther Vandross, Sting, just to name a few of the acts that she's toured with. We have to mention Mary Clayton as well for her work on the Stones' Give Me Shelter. Thanks, Mona. Here is Lisa Fischer and Mary Clayton on backing vocals for the Rolling Stones hit. This is Give Me Shelter. That's the Rolling Stones featuring backup singers Lisa Fischer and Mary Clayton. Fischer's name might not be familiar, but her voice is everywhere, from records by Luther Vandross, Billy Ocean, Dionne Warwick, Aretha Franklin, and Alicia Keys to live shows from Tina Turner, Chaka Khan, and Dolly Parton. Fischer has provided the vocal backup and harmonies to some of the best known songs of the past 4 decades. She retired in 2016. Next week, we continue to put backup singers in the spotlight. You can pick your song by calling the listener line 1-866-340-1932. We're coming up on World Report here, but first we'll get an update with Bill Fee.
Good morning, Matt. An outbreak at the Rotary Manor in Dawson Creek has ended, the last remaining one in a long-term care facility in the province. The care home saw 2 confirmed cases of COVID that resulted in the death of 1 resident. The BC Wildfire Service is reminding boaters to steer clear of firefighting aircraft working in the Caribou Regional District. There are a couple of wildfires of note burning near 100 Mile House.
Thanks very much. We'll have more after World Report. Coming up in our final half hour, physical distancing with a smile. At 8:20, we'll find out how a Prince George comedian is hoping to raise spirits and money one backyard show at a time. And warming waters. Coming up at 8:20, we'll speak with a UNBC professor about the effects of climate change on northern fish populations. First, though, let's check in with Bill Fee at our Daybreak News Desk.
Good morning, Matt. The wildfire burning in BC's north-central interior has prompted an evacuation alert. The Mount Porter fire is estimated at 1,600 hectares, burning out of control near Amanika Provincial Park. And the Blueberry River First Nation says it will still allow development in its territory, but it has to be done responsibly. Chief Marvin Yehé made the comments at a news conference yesterday celebrating the BC Supreme Court ruling that found resource development in northeastern BC was violating the Blueberry River's treaty rights.
Thanks very much. That's Bill Fee at our Daybreak News Desk. Take a quick look at our temperatures across the region here. It is 13 degrees and sunny in Prince George right now, 15 degrees in Quesnel, still cloudy, and 13 degrees in Prince Rupert. On Haida Gwaii, it is raining lightly and 14 degrees at the Massett Municipal Airport, 15 degrees in Sandspit. The Bella Bella Airport, it is misty and 12 degrees. Mainly sunny and 16 in Bella Coola. At the Terrace Airport between Terrace and Kitimat, it is 17 degrees, warming up there and partly cloudy. In Stewart, it's mostly cloudy and 14 degrees. In Smithers, it's 17 degrees. In Burns Lake, it's 15 degrees rather. In Fort St. James, it is 17 degrees, and in Mackenzie, it is 17 degrees. In the Peace, it's mostly cloudy and 18 degrees, and Fort St. John. In Dawson Creek, it's mainly sunny and 17. In Chetwynd, it's cloudy and 18 degrees with temperatures rising. In Fort Nelson, it's partly cloudy and 17 degrees, and in Dease Lake, it's cloudy and 13 degrees.
It will be smoky across much of the north today. Heat warnings are in effect for the north and south Peace. Smoky skies bulletin is still in effect for Prince George and the North Caribou. Prince George and the central interior can expect sunny skies today. Clouds later on highs to 31 for the North Caribou and Quesnel. Sunny as well with smoke. Increasing clouds for the afternoon. 32 is the expected high. In the Robson Valley, there is a chance of thunderstorms by this afternoon. Highs will reach 32, and there is an extreme UV index there. Sun and cloud for the Lakes District and Smithers. Highs up around 29 today. Across the Peace in Fort Nelson, sunny as well. Highs hitting 34 with the humidex and a risk of late-day thunderstorm activity. Clouds for the coastal inland section, highs at 25. Closer to the water, cloudy, and a chance of showers today with highs up around 15 degrees.
It's 8:13. You're listening to CBC Daybreak North, on CBC Radio 1. 91.5 FM in Prince George, 102.9 FM in Fraser Lake. And these aren't good times to be a freshwater fish. Global warming and rising water temperatures are putting fish populations in northern BC and around the world under tremendous strain. Eduardo Martins is an assistant professor at the University of Northern British Columbia and principal investigator at UNBC's Freshwater Fish Ecology Laboratory. He's here this morning to talk about the present and possible future for fish in this part of the province. Good morning.
Good morning, man.
At the Freshwater Fish Ecology Laboratory, you and your team, you do a great deal of work researching the effects of warm water temperatures on fish populations. So could you give us sort of an overview of some of the things that you look at?
So we basically look at how water temperature influences things like the behavior of the fish, their survival in the environment, and reproduction. And this is mainly because temperature is